Hi, this is David with Shur-Loc Fabrics, and I'm going to cover stretching a 22.5 degree fabric on our Easy 2.0 profile frame system. I'm going to go over some of the key features of the stretching system here first, as well as the frame and the panel, and then we'll jump right into it. So we've got our our stretching system here that will stretch the frame. We've got our handle up here. I've got my removal strip here as well that just lays down flat into the body of the stretcher itself until it's needed later on when we go to remove a fabric. And then I've also got my stretcher strips here. This one has individual pieces. Sometimes you'll have a long strip and then a short strip. It really depends on the sizing configuration of the frame that you have and how that's sent out at that time. So to remove these, they're really simple to replace. You need to rotate the handle downward, and those will simply just slide out of the end. So no need to take out any bolts. It's not laborious. So if one of those happens to break over time, that can simply just be slid out the end, and that will be taken care of. You can replace that strip and just keep going. These are the centering pads here that will slide in. So they have a handle on them that you can tighten up. And generally, I fix this one side, my left-hand side here, because I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me just to adjust the right side. So I will fix this side, tighten that up so that basically stays put all the time. And then I simply adjust this side in, lock that up with the handle there, and we'll stretch it up. So you'll see me use that a little bit more. But those are typically only used on the long sides. We'll look at that as we stretch it. And they're only really needed on a 22.5 degree fabric stretch. So jumping into our frame system here, we've got our Easy frame. And with Easy frames, they have the tension bars. So those tension bars are removable. Any 22.5 degree fabric will need the small set screws. They're probably difficult to see on the video, but on one end, they will have a set screw on each end of this bar. Those set screws will always go towards the inside of the frame. So it'll only fit on one way, just like that one. And all of the bars have those set screws at the end. That will keep the fabric in line with where it needs to be when it's at a 22.5 degree angle. As far as our fabric goes, you can order these in most any mesh count. They're usually color coded, they're stamped in the corner for easy identification, and they are custom cut for the specific frame size, so they're not interchangeable. And the plastic pieces are specifically cut as well to fit right inside of those little set screws so that they won't move around much. So I'm gonna start stretching here. As you see, I've just slid my frame underneath the safety bar. So that just kind of your third hand. It keeps it from tilting up when you go to stretch it. So I'm going to do as much as I can here. Usually I would walk around to the other side, and I may have to in the future here. But I'm going to pop that side free, and I'm just going to load in the fabric. Like I said, I'd normally walk around to the other side for ease, but not to not get in the way of the video. I'll stay out of the way there. So I've got this first long side on hook number 3. Very, very important that you start on the long sides first. That way we're pulling the majority of the mesh first and then go to the short sides. So whatever you do to one long side, do the same to the parallel long side. So I've got this one. There's a total of 4 hooks on each with the 2.0 Easy frame. There's 4 total hooks. Hook 1 is on the inside edge, and then it counts out from there. So I've got this long bar on hook 3. So there's just 1 hook left on that back edge. So I'm simply going to load in my Shur-Loc panel into that inner strip. It's centered in between the set screws there. Make sure it's fully seated down. And I'm just going to load it on there by hand as far as I can. I can only pull that to hook number 2. So this is the perfect time to use the stretcher. So I will just seat the frame over into this one corner here, and this one's already locked into place, so that handle is tightened up. It's nestled right in there. One thing that I did fail to mention at the beginning are these little set screws on the back. They're really spacers for the frame. We want those, and I know it's probably impossible to see on the video there, but they're nylon screws, and they are completely movable. So there's a slide nut in the back there, so you can loosen it. Never need to use a wrench on those, just finger tighten is just fine. But you do want them a consistent height all the way across there, so make sure that they're all kind of finger just snugged up. I space those out nice and even across the entire stretcher so that there's even support points all across the frame. So as I slide that in, those are all spaced out nice and even there. Once I get it close, I will then slide in my 22.5-degree angle support pad here. So I'll slide that into place, push it as far as I can, and then I will tighten up my handle there. These are spring loaded, so you can push back on the handle, rotate down, and then retighten. So you can, as long as it's out, you can free spin that and it doesn't tighten or loosen it. But as soon as it engages in one of the notches, that's when you can pull on it and tighten it. So I've got this, again, this tension bar is on hook number 2. And I've got 4 strips here today on this one, so I'm going to utilize all 4 of them to get a nice even spread on there. Then I will lower my handle, and there's not much tension on this fabric at this point. So as you can see, these 2 support pads here are guiding the tension bar and keeping it in line. I'm okay with a slight gap on one end or the other. It's naturally going to always want to go to the right-hand side, and it's going to push against this edge. So to combat that, sometimes you can slide these strips in a way where it skews the mesh, and you will actually be able to pull the tension bar over to the left. So instead of just being straight on with it, you can simply push each one of those over real quick, and then when you push down on the handle, it will give a pull against that angle to try and straighten up the tension bar. So I am on hook 3. So I didn't want to go any more than that until I've got my short sides loaded here. I'm going to step over onto one of the sides and load in my Shur-Loc panel here. Make sure that that's flush and totally seated all the way down. I'm going to hook number 2 there, it looks like. It's whatever's comfortable by hand. Push this over so you can see a little bit there. Load in my tension bar to that point as well. A good technique, if you're almost there and you can't quite get it, is putting your hand underneath and pulling like that. It's difficult to put your fingers on the top and get much strength of a pull. So sometimes if I tilt out the frame like that, I can literally get an extra hook just by putting my hand underneath and using that grip strength. So it's whatever's comfortable for the user. That's not a necessity, but sometimes it's nice just to get that extra hook in place. So because I did that, I actually got that first side onto hook number 3. This other parallel short side is on hook number 2. So it wouldn't have mattered if they were both on 2. It really doesn't matter which side you start with. They both just need to get to hook number 3 to match the long sides. So I'm going to load in my stretcher strips there. And as you can see, I'm not using the guide pads here on the ends. It is an option. You can certainly do that if you'd like. But with the 22.5-degree angle, most all of that torque and that tension of the fabric is going to be on the long sides. So when these are centered and done right on there, the short sides will just follow suit and it'll stay centered as well. So I'm on hook number 3 on all of my tension bars right now. When you get to that point, you simply want to go back to one of your long sides. It doesn't matter if it was the first side that you started with. Just go to one of your long sides. And if you happen to move this out of the way, you can simply just move that guide pad right back into position. You do want to get some torque on that because as we build tension, it will want to push harder and harder. So if this is just real lightly done, it can actually push that over. So we want to keep that tension bar centered as possible. So I will continue to load in my strips here. Make sure that those are fully seated down inside there. You can feel if they're raised, it'll cause problems. So make sure that that's completely seated. That will really prolong the life of the stretcher strip itself. If those are seated, these strips should last for years. So as I push down, I can anticipate that angle, skew my stretcher strip pieces over, so that way it'll kind of help combat that angle and pull it a little bit over there. So this one I'm going to the final 4th hook. So you can definitely put 2 hands on the handle if you'd like. I like to feel the tension bar seat right on there when it drops over those hooks and engages on those hooks. I like to have one hand there so I can really feel it. You can also hear it as well when it seats down on there. But highly encourage any operator that's being trained to really get a good look down on that bottom edge and inspect it and make sure that that tension bar is fully seated before you take your hands off of the handle itself. So you want to keep one hand on it, do a good inspection, and then once you know that it's fully seated, then you're safe to raise this up and remove the stretcher strips. So sometimes you can get away with just sliding it out and not having to move the guide pad here, but I'll just re-show you just in case. Sometimes the welds on the frames are slightly irregular and it will force you to have to slide that pad out in each time, but it's really quick and easy. Let's tighten that up. So as you see, I've completed the one long side, went onto the 4th hook. Now I'm going to my parallel long side and I'm going to go to the 4th hook as well. So I've got all my stretcher strips loaded in there. They're all fully seated down and flat, really important. I'm going to skew this angle over again just to pull against the angle of the 22.5 degrees on the mesh. So I'm just going to pull down on there, just do a visual inspection as I go. If it starts to get hard, you can definitely use 2 hands again. But because of the length of it, sometimes one side may drop in while the other side is still up slightly. So you just get a good look at that, make sure it's fully seated before you release off on there. And you can safely move up the handle and remove the strips. If you are having an issue where you're pulling down on the handle and one side just won't seat, the most common cure for that is that maybe the little standoffs in the back here were not spaced properly and you had a large area that did not have any support, and that will make the frame sit a little bit crooked. So when you go to pull back, it wants to pull it straight, but if the frame's not straight underneath, it won't engage onto those hooks. So you can simply just remove that back, put it on the hook that you were at before that, realign these and space those out, and then re-stretch. I've got 2 long sides on hook number 3. Raise up my handle. And as you've done this a few times, it starts to get a lot quicker. I like to just leave the weight of the handle down like that, make sure that all my strips are flat. And if this kicks over a little bit, it's usually self-centering itself. The tension bar is on the frame based off of the long sides. So I'm okay if it jumps over just a little bit. So I'm just going to pull this down. This is nice because you can actually look at both ends and make sure that they are fully seated onto the hooks. So I did that, make sure it was all the way down. I've got my 3rd side on there. I'm going to rotate around. So I'm on my final short side, and I'm going to be going to hook 4 again. So I've evenly spaced those out. Just going to press down on here and start to engage tension. And this is my 4th and final side. So you can expect that it's going to be more of a difficult push down on this. That's where all your tension is kind of finishing up at. So I see that it's fully seated. I'll remove the stretcher strips and bring that out. Got my Shur-Loc 130 tension meter here. And we're right at about 40 newtons. This is a 9690, so we're right in spec with that. Usually I check it both ways, but I know you won't be able to see it on video there anyway. So we're all set, it's ready to go. I also want to show you the removal process, because what's great about Shur-Loc panels is you can remove the panel off of the frame. You can store it, you can put it back on. If you don't have enough frames and you need to switch a mesh count out, you can always take that off and swap them around any way you need to. So it gives you the freedom to be able to do that. On removal, I kind of just do the exact opposite of the same process of when I put it on. So I'm going to start with the short sides. This is where this little piece comes in here. It's a flat bar. It usually just sits nice and flush into the stretching body here. But when I want to remove, I tilt it up vertical on edge. So what that does is it gives it extra height for the stretcher strips to go over the top of. Do this, load it in just like we have. Put the weight of the handle down again there. And as you can see, I've got a little ramp now, so that's higher. So when I pull back, it's going to lift off those hooks, and then it'll pick up that tension bar and lift off. So no need to pull any further. You don't have to max out the stretcher or anything like that for going down. Just simply apply some pressure and just keep going back so you can see that the bar has lifted off, and then you can just slowly release pressure. I like to put one hand on there so I can feel it lift. And I will just let that go back to hook number 2. It's right in the middle. If you go all the way back to hook number 1, it can be difficult sometimes to get the stretcher strips out. Or when you do the final release, if you don't have a large table, then the tension bars can want to fall off and drop down with no tension holding them on. Whatever you do to one side, just match it to the parallel side. So I've centered those up pretty well on there. Make sure that they're all seated down. I can see that they are. Just give a little bit of pressure. That will jump right off. Sometimes if it gets hung up, you can give a little bit of extra lift with your finger underneath there if needed. Usually it's not, but little tips along the way can definitely help out. So once I've got to that point, I could tell that the tension wasn't very much, so I just simply pulled back. I removed the Shur-Loc panel from the tension bar there, and usually I would walk around and just unload that other side, but to not get in the way there, I just rotated it around. And since I could get off that side, I knew I could get this side off by hand as well. So now I've got just my long sides that are still attached, and it is equally important, and actually even more so important really, when you're removing the fabric, because it is under a load still, and the long sides have all the angle. So very, very important to slide in your centering pad here. If you don't and you remove it, it will really quickly slide over to one side, and it can lead to causing a slight rip on the end and ruining the handle. So be careful for that. If you've got your centering pad slid in there and tight, it won't be an issue. Just gonna load in all the strips here just like that, and just do a quick visual, make sure everything's good and tight. And so you could hear that noise. That was as soon as I pulled back on the tension bar, that automatically just went that direction, hit into that edge. But our centering pad just stopped it and held it right in position, so that was good. And I've just go back here. It's on to hook number 2. Remove my stretcher strip, and because the sides, the short ends are off, now I can just remove that by hand and simply take out my fabric panel, and I'm back to where I started. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us and give us a call. You can also find additional information at Shur-Loc.com. Thank you so much for watching.